Friendship with that person can be possible, but not until the limerence has run its course and you've done some internal healing work. It's the kind of work that takes time and changes the way that you see them, but also yourself. At this point, the limerent feelings have eased. You're no longer caught in the high-stakes obsession, no longer spinning in the loop of maybe they love me, maybe they don't. Something essential has shifted. The fantasy has cracked and shattered. You can finally see the LO not as an ideal or as an escape plan or just this cosmic mirror, but simply as a person. One of the most painful and yet liberating turning points is what some people call the death of hope. When your nervous system no longer clings to the idea of romantic reciprocation. It's not just knowing it in your head, but feeling it in your gut. That there's no secret longing waiting to be fulfilled, no storyline that's going to be resolved in the way that you once hoped. And when that hope dies, something else can begin. Limerence naturally fades when the uncertainty that fuels it gets resolved, either through clear rejection or a committed relationship that settles the ambiguity. And as that illusion loses its grip, the idealization starts to fray. Here are some signs that limerence is genuinely dissolving. First and foremost, you don't check their social media as often. You text them less, if you were messaging at all. You're not waiting around for any communication or sign. Your self-worth doesn't hang on to their attention anymore. Your brain feels clearer, work gets easier, you're more present with other people. The sharp anxiety dulls, and so does the jealousy. You start seeing their contradictions, the things you glossed over before. The emotional roller coaster flattens out, and there's fewer highs and lows, and fewer crashing out. But most importantly, you're open to other people, real connections, new conversations, not always about them. And if both people have done their work and they've metabolized what the limerence meant, what it masked, what it revealed, then yes, sometimes friendship can emerge. But only when that projection is gone. Only when you've rehumanized them, seen their flaws, felt the disappointment, and still chosen a connection that's rooted in reality and not fantasy. Because healthy friendship isn't built on longing, or potential, or maybe some days. It's built on mutual presence, mutual respect, and a real relationship with a real person, not a placeholder for something else. However, this process doesn't follow a strict timeline. It's less about how long it's been and more about where you are in your recovery. I've actually created an assessment to help you figure out what phase you're in based on common emotional and behavioral shifts. It's linked below and it's free. Another thing I wanted to add was that there are real examples of people who become friends with their LO. Post-Limerence friendship is real, but it doesn't happen overnight. It usually comes after a long stretch of space, therapy, and sometimes years of no contact. One person shared how they reconnected with a former colleague after several years and found that while the spark was faintly there, the obsession had completely dissolved. And what remained was this kind of tender care, a grounded companionship. Another described finding balance with a former bandmate, but not before undergoing EMDR, ketamine-assisted therapy, and some brutal self-honesty. The kind that makes you look at who your LO actually was and not who you want them to be. There are themes in these stories, and that is a clear boundary between past and fantasy and present truth, and a full acceptance of the now. But even then, there are some folks who report that they fell back into old patterns. They started prioritizing the LO's needs, letting hope sneak back in, and even the smallest what if can be destabilizing. To make post-limerence friendship work, it has to be grounded in shared values, not shared longing. And it requires continuous honesty with yourself, because relapse doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it's a very subtle self-abandonment. So the question is, can you stay friends with your LO? Maybe, but not during the storm, not while you're in active limerence. Because during active limerence, friendship often isn't friendship at all. It's proximity to the drug. It's emotional self-harm in a socially acceptable and concealable way. Real friendship requires you to be whole, not waiting and not starving for intimacy or harboring a crush. It's only after that fantasy dies, after your nervous system stabilizes, that something more grounded might take root. And that's when you get to ask, is this a person I genuinely enjoy? Is there mutual respect here? Do we know each other, really? If you want to stay friends with this person, the paths that you might take may involve cutting contact for a while, reworking the internal attachment wounds that got activated, letting go of the fantasy version of them, and grieving it, rebuilding your life without them at the center, and then maybe beginning again if it's mutual, honest, and the boundaries are clear. Overall, healing creates a new kind of foundation, one where connection doesn't come at the expense of your self-worth, one where you don't lose yourself to keep someone else. Some post-limerence friendships do exist, but they're rarely a return to what it was. There's something new entirely, something more careful, something stable, and sometimes the healthiest outcome is to not have a friendship at all. So if you're wondering if we could ever just be friends, you have to pause for a moment and ask yourself, where am I really in this process? Again, it's not how much time has passed. It's about where you are in these phases of healing. If you're still deep in that rumination loop or holding on to that quiet hope, it might not be time yet. But if you're noticing that fantasy is fading and a more grounded sense of self is emerging, then perhaps, if you're not sure what phase you're in or how to move forward, I've created a roadmap that can help you check in with yourself. If you want support navigating this process, I offer coaching for people working through limerence. You'll find both of those things in the description, and if you've gotten this far in the video, I appreciate you, and I hope you have a lovely day. Take care.